My name is Peter Wolfl, and welcome to Careers. Today's show is about the Metro Toronto Ambulance, and we are joined by Cindy Nicholson, who is a paramedic, and Rod McBirnie, an ambulance attendant. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peter.
You both have different titles, so I assume that you have different careers as well, or different duties associated with those titles. Rod, what does an ambulance attendant do?
Well, essentially, Peter, they are the same. They're engaged in the same service. The essential difference is that the paramedic has more advanced training.
Okay, she'll tell us what she does.
Okay.
What do you do as an attendant?
As an attendant, we perform emergency care in case of illness, trauma. I think people are generally familiar with what we do from programs that they've seen on TV. It's becoming a fairly glamorous field at this time. I'm confined to more basic practices. We'll do CPR in the case of heart calls, standard and advanced first aid, but we won't be doing any medically designated acts or delegated acts. This is something that the paramedics are doing, and Cindy will explain that to you.
So you do all the driving, is that correct?
We alternate.
You do?
The driver attendant does driving and attending patient care.
Okay. Okay, and before we get on to Cindy, why did you decide to get into this field?
I think it was basically the personal satisfaction I thought I'd derive from it. I was always rather interested in it, and it was a major career change for me from what I was doing before. I was involved in business, and I didn't get the immediate satisfaction that I do get from patient care and the direct people contact.
I see. Okay, great. Cindy, what does a paramedic do?
To hopefully explain this in terms that most people will understand, Peter, as Rod alluded, I do more advanced techniques under the auspices of an emergency physician that I contact. We have certain delegated medical acts, they're called. They involve intubation, which is a very advanced airway management, to start an IV and to administer drugs. We do certain things like that. They're just an add-on to the driver attendant.
So are you in constant communication over the airwaves with one of these doctors?
Yes, every time we see a patient and we begin an assessment, it's understood that at some point in our treatment we will contact a doctor for further instructions.
So were you an ambulance attendant first for a while?
That's correct. You have to have at least 3 years as an ambulance attendant before you become a paramedic. I actually had 5 years as a driver attendant before I was able to get into the program.
Okay. And why did you choose this career?
Always interested in the health field. I had pursued it as far as university with a degree, and didn't quite get my first my first love. So this is a satisfying second choice.
Well, what kind of training do you need to be an ambulance attendant?
Essentially, you need a year of college and a community college, and then it's a matter of passing ministry examinations, and that qualifies the minimum standards, and at that point you're eligible for employment. So it's a year of community college, that's the major thing, and then of course the requirements for that are, for people interested, would have to be fairly strong in their sciences when they're in high school. And the program itself is a very demanding one. It requires a lot of time and energy. It's not. It's a very concentrated year. It's not one that you can just sort of walk through. And then the ministry exams they qualify the basic standards for people working in the field across in Ontario.
But until you have that year of community college, it's not even worthwhile applying to the job.
No, you can't.
That's a prerequisite. Okay, and once you have that, what are the ambulance people looking for in a candidate that they would select?
Well, there are subjective things in terms of people skills, communication. It's probably one of the most important parts of the job. Also a fairly good level of physical fitness. or health, because the physical demands of the job can be very trying. There can be a high injury rate because there's a lot of stress. You're lifting a lot of people, and it's not all running out and doing razzle-dazzle things in the field. It's lifting patients. You're dealing with a lot of chronic care, older people, as well as, you know, young people, just general medical illnesses and trauma. But communication, physical aptitude or ability, and judgment, being able to assess and judge a situation and respond in a calm fashion.
Okay. Have you any idea of how many people applied at all to this career last year?
To the colleges, initially, you're looking at, I think now, I've had estimates of approximately between 600 and 1,000 people for approximately, say, one college would offer 40 positions, and they might have 600 to 1,000 applicants. So it's becoming fairly high profile, just to get into the field.
Okay. What are some of the colleges in the Toronto area that people can take these courses at?
There's two colleges, Peter. There's Centennial College, which offers the course, which is at Warden in St. Clair area, and there's Humber College out the West End, and they both have very good programs.
Okay, great. So once you have completed that college education and you've applied and been accepted by the ambulance, what kind of training takes place after that, and where is it taking place?
That varies from service to service. The training is an ongoing thing. Once you get into this field, you have to expect that you have to update all the time. It's sort of skills mastery. If you're doing things in the field that if you don't do it on a regular basis, or you're not recertifying or retraining, you lose it, and you don't need that happening when you're faced with an emergency situation. In the case of Metro, any new applicants will go through a 3-week fairly intensive training program before they're sent out on the road. And that's all done up at the headquarters.
Who sets the standards? Have you any idea who sets the standards for the quality of education behind ambulance attendants and paramedics?
I believe it's all provincial standards that must be met. They're the criteria by the Ministry of Health. They have set down that you must...
Okay.
That's worked out also in conjunction with the colleges. There's a fairly intimate exchange there in order to set the standards that they require for attendance.
Before we go on and off the education topic, what are the chances of finding employment once you have completed that education?
It depends on what year.
Yeah, it really varies.
Yeah, this year it's extremely good. 2 years ago, I'd say it was difficult to find immediate employment. It really varies from year to year.
It also depends, Peter, if you're willing to relocate. A lot of people come out and want Metro. I think Metro has quite a profile, and it's quite a progressive service. But if you're willing to go out into the province to a smaller service, get some experience, and then if your heart is set on Metro and try again, I mean, the opportunity for employment increases when you can come back to Metro and say, I have so many years experience elsewhere.
Do you know what the average starting salary is for this field?
It again depends on if you're a provincial service or...
Okay, let's say for the Metro Toronto.
For Metro?
Somewhere 28.
I would say, yeah, 27,000, 28,000.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. It's rather nice starting.
That's
it's attractive to the...
Yeah. And then I guess it goes up depending on your qualifications and experience thereafter, does it?
More, there's a set, I think, rate scale throughout Metro. And of course, the paramedics have a premium there again, but the increments, I think, are pre-established.
Okay. Now what happens when I call 911 and you become dispatched? What steps do you go through? typically?
Do you want it right from the beginning, Peter?
Yeah, yeah, let's give us a little scenario.
Okay, if the public calls 911, it is answered by a 911 operator, which is at police headquarters on Jarvis. They will stay on the line and they will ascertain from the person exactly what the problem is, whether the person in question requires the police, the fire department, or our services, or if in fact they need all three. The 911 operator is then responsible for punching into the different services. They have direct lines.
That must be quite a responsibility in itself for deciding
Yes, certainly.
what is to be selected.
And then they would pass on the information to our department. A dispatcher or a call receiver would take the information and then pass it up to the quadrant dispatcher that's sitting a typical area of the city. And by being familiar with where the call is originating, they make the decision as to which is the most appropriate ambulance, the closest ambulance.
I see. Okay. So then when your station gets called, what happens? Does a bell go off or do you get a phone call?
Exactly, as simple as that. The phone rings.
The red phone.
The red phone. It's called the
hotline.
The hotline, exactly. It rings and the dispatcher will give you the address, and in our instance, they'll give you the call information, exactly what you're going to, so that you have a little bit of pre-knowledge as to what you're going to be faced with, and hopefully you can start to get your thinking into that mode as to what you're going to be faced with.
It works slightly differently for the ambulance, because the medics and the ambulance may be dispatched to the same call. And in the case of the ambulance, we may not know exactly at the time of dispatch what we're going to. We'll be given what is called a pre-alert, and that's an emergency run. And until we get the details, we'll run that as an emergency. And then it might be downgraded, whatever, but quite often when we go out the door, we have absolutely no idea of what we're going to. We just know where it is.
I see. We're going to take a short break right now. When we return, we'll continue talking about a potential career with the Metro Toronto Ambulance. Stay tuned.
It is the most prevalent disease in Canada. 3 million Canadians suffer from it. 30,000 of them are under 15. The majority are between 30 and 50 years old. By age 65, 90% of Canadians will have it. $50 million is spent annually on quack and unproven cures. Only $5 million is spent on hard scientific research. The disease is arthritis. Research will find a cure. Please, be generous.
Welcome back to Careers. Today's show is about the Metro Toronto Ambulance. Now, we were talking before about you being dispatched. By the way, do the dispatchers have the same kind of training that you go through?
It's not a prerequisite. Basically, what's required of them is a good working knowledge of the city. But as far as any medical background is concerned, it's not a requirement at all.
Okay.
We're also now on computer, and that's part of their training as well when they get up to headquarters, and they're selected.
What does the computer do?
It assists them greatly in finding locations and such. They can apparently just key in certain addresses, your home address for whatever, for example, Peter, and immediately it would come up the major intersection. So it just gives the dispatcher that much more information at a quicker speed.
Right. I imagine as an attendant, though, you have to have a very good knowledge of your area.
You end up having them, but there are obscure little streets that you may have heard of, but you don't know the exact location. So this computer system is immensely valuable to quickly locating, or at least directing you to the appropriate location.
Okay. Have you had to have some extra training in driving to get through the streets really quickly?
I think we're
through
trained every day.
traffic?
One has to adjust, and there's a lot of that that's necessary. The bigger the city gets, the more difficult it is to maneuver around.
Like, what do you do during rush hour, for instance?
You jump on the siren and pray. People don't always observe the emergency system, so you just have to adjust.
Okay. When somebody calls you, is there a fee for that call?
Yeah, there is a user's fee with the service. I believe if I'm correct in saying that the patient as well as OHIP divide the cost. The
I see.
hospital does the billing. We, as a department, do not bill the patient.
Okay, and what is the cost then for calling the ambulance?
I believe.
Nominally now, I think it would be...
44?
It's 44.
Yeah, it's still
so
$44, I think.
The user would pay $22.
22.
Okay.
As far as I know, current prices.
No. I guess the system in the United States is a little bit different from this, is it not?
As I understand it,
I
I'm
think
not
it's a lot more
familiar with
expensive.
their system, but
Mhm.
apparently if you don't have your charge X or whatever up front, you may not be getting a ride.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's
There's
best
no
not to be
billing later.
sick when you're in the States.
That's one of the advantages to Ontario's
Okay.
healthcare system.
Now, if somebody calls the ambulance, but it's a false alarm, what happens then? I think you were telling me
It's-
before that, in fact, some people are even using the ambulance as a taxi service.
Unfortunately, I have to tell you this, Peter, but it is abused quite a bit. Often people don't understand the 911. They figure that's what you call just to get an ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't realize that is an emergency number,
Right.
essentially. And as I mentioned before, we often are called for non-emergent matters, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there is no penalty for it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Whereas with the fire department there is. I think that it's considered a criminal offense.
I believe if you had a chronic abuser,
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's something in place that the police, if they felt it required it, could charge the person
Mm-hmm. At least public mischief, they
public
can always be
mischief or
charged for
something.
that.
That's right.
Okay, are you affiliated with the St. John's ambulance at all?
no
Or the
direct
training?
affiliation, no. The ambulance attendants, of course, minimum have their St. John's
Mm-hmm.
first aid and so on, but as far as any direct affiliation goes, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now you obviously work very closely with a number of other organizations, such as the police and the fire department. Are you ever finding that your work overlaps with theirs?
To a great degree.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in recent times now, with the advent of the 911 system, you'll see all three emergency services arrive
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at a true emergency.
Okay.
You know, 90 to 100% of the time.
You've mentioned some of the steps that you go through from being an ambulance attendant to being a paramedic. What's the next step for you, Cindy? What are some of the options open to you after that?
For me personally, it's probably management. At a point in time, I will leave the operations per se, and all the physical and stressful demands that it entails. Also, though, Peter, with the advent of the province trying to get more and more paramedics in outlying services, there seems to be, because we're such a small entity at this point and we're quite new, there appears to be job openings in that sense that we could almost coordinate a paramedic program in another service.
Mm-hmm.
There looks like there's going to be job opportunities for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now the Metro Toronto ambulance, that's it's basically, how is it funded? Have you any idea how it's funded?
Municipal. This
Mhm.
Is it?
Toronto
So
Municipal.
the same way that the police or the
Yeah.
As
fire
well as
department
the
would be
ministry.
funded?
The Ministry of Health also has to fund us as well.
Okay. Now clearly women are getting involved with this field as well as men. Is there a good balance there, would you say?
When I joined the department 6+ years ago, there was, I believe, 25 women out of a complement in the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the figures are now anywhere 50 to 100 women out of a complement of about 700 driver attendants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we
Okay.
have a good foothold.
You're getting more powerful. How about the minorities? Are there a number of them being hired as well?
Go ahead, Ron.
I don't know if there's a concerted effort. It's a matter of whomever has the qualifications, and largely that's
Okay. Do you have a union?
yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay. and
We're part of Local 43, actually,
I see.
which is all outdoor workers.
Does that mean you also have the right to strike?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Have you ever done so? That you know
I
of?
think there have been threats, but never followed through.
Mhm.
I think generally the people in the industry are very reluctant to
Mhm.
exercise that right for obvious reasons.
Mhm. Mhm.
Public safety. I mean, generally the people involved in in this field are pretty conscientious or socially conscious. So it's not a right that they feel comfortable about exercising.
Okay. And what about mandatory retirement? Does that exist in your field?
65.
65 is the age.
Okay. And what about if you have any medical problems? Would they sometimes dismiss you on those grounds?
No, most work-related injuries would, I mean, you'd be taken care of as far as long-term disability or workman's compensation. It certainly isn't.
So you have very good benefits associated with this work.
It's not a means of dismissal.
Okay. Now let's run through our little scenario that we had before a little bit further, especially from the paramedic point of view. What would happen if you were called to attend a heart attack? What would be some of the steps upon, let's say, arriving at the scene?
Okay. Usually we're the last to arrive as far as...
Why is that?
Fewer of them.
Fewer of us?
Really?
Yeah, the ambulance would be there. Probably the fire department and the ambulance would be there just within minutes of each other. And we would be, assuming we have an unconscious patient, and it is a heart condition, we've obtained the history, etc. We'd be performing CPR, trying to stabilize as best we can. Upon the arrival of the paramedics, I'll let Cindy take it away from here.
I was just going to expand on what Rod said. Because we are the last people, it's because we know that there will be an ambulance there to attend to the patient. So we
really
come a further distance.
So you really operate independently of the ambulance attendants then? You come separately, you don't work together as a team?
Hand in hand, but they do more...
But you don't arrive together?
No.
No, we come in separate vehicles and
I
such.
see.
So
Right.
on my arrival, hopefully, well, I know Rod would be doing his assessment of the patient and his treatment of the patient, and then I would just build upon that as far as taking the information he has for me, assessing the patient, and then instituting. We have certain treatment that we're allowed to do independent of speaking to a doctor.
And when does the doctor come in? Does he already come in from the attendant's point of view? Do you already start talking to the doctor?
No,
That's just a delegated act as far as we're concerned. It's part of the ALS program. That once I get to a point where I've done everything I'm capable of doing independently of talking to the doctor, then I must patch through to him.
Okay. And then what kind of equipment are you making use of there?
Unfortunately, we have quite an extensive amount of equipment.
That must be a course in itself, just to know all these different gadgets that you have to use.
Exactly, and just the physical day-to-day lugging of it in and out of residences and such. But we have a monitor to ascertain what rhythm your heart is in, what exactly your heart is doing. We have advanced airway equipment, and we have all of our intravenous equipment, and we have a drug therapy box that we bring in as well. So 4 main pieces of equipment would come in with us, Peter.
Wow. I imagine because technology is changing so fast, you continuously have to try and keep up with it.
It's, well, generally they're expanding the duties of the ambulance department. They're bringing more paramedical functions in. One of the things being the monitor, defibrillator. That's becoming something that the ambulance attendants also doing. It's not strictly the medics. And gradually, I think through a modular expansion, they're going to give more responsibility over to the attendants.
Okay. Roger, what's your plans for the future?
Just keep on plugging. I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing.
Do you want to be a paramedic?
Gradually working towards that, yeah. That ideally is one step I'd like to involve myself in, but that's entirely dependent on what direction the overall program is going to go, and that is very much up in the air at the present time.
Oh, why so?
It's a matter of how they want to cover the largest area economically. Now, Cindy is part of a pilot group of paramedics who've had extensive training in a variety of delegated medical acts. And I'm of the group where they're thinking of this modular thing where you give one act or procedure to them at a time. So they're gradually trying to expand the program, but it's a matter of training a paramedic is a very, very expensive proposition. Okay. If you're going to go the full gambit, it may be more economical to train a greater number in essential acts without covering the whole gambit.
Okay.
And that is all being assessed right now.
Before we wrap it up, is there a telephone number that our viewers can call if they have some further questions about this potential career?
The most appropriate number to call is Metro personnel at 392-8665.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Cindy and Rod, for being guests on Careers.
Thank you, Peter.
If you have any suggestions for this show, as for other topics or for potential guests, please let me know. You can write to me, Peter Wolfl, care of Graham Cable TV, and the address is 35 Scarlett Road, Toronto, Ontario, M6N 4J8. I'm Peter Wolfl, and from all of us here at the studio, good luck in your own career.